Hey everybody, this is Lonnie Sweet from the Sweet Management Group, and you are either listening to or watching the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast, where we talk to sales executives from the culinary, sports, general business, and entertainment worlds about their journey, about being a salesperson in this industry and what it took to get to where they are today. So whether you're listening in your earbuds, you're sitting in front of your computer, I appreciate you stopping by and hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome to the Never Sell Eskimos, Ice to Eskimos podcast. I'm Lonnie Sweet, the CEO of Sweet Manager Group, formerly of the Connect Group. I'm going to stop saying that now. Once again, I got a good buddy of mine on the podcast with me today. His name is Matt Pazaras. Matt is the Chief Business Development and Strategy Officer for the NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks at Fiserv Forum. Matt and I go way back, man. He's been at the Buck. I think he's been at the Buck for 8 or 9 years now, right?
It'll be 8 years in December.
8 years in December. Before that, he was in New York. He worked at Madison Square Garden. He worked at Raptor Sports. I remember sitting in a couple of restaurants before, taking the trip out to Milwaukee, and he's working with another buddy of mine over there. They've really reinvented all of Milwaukee when they built Fiserv Forum, and it's just a really pretty cool story. So either way, I'm excited because more than anything, he's just a fucking good dude, and I like to talk to him. I don't see him nearly enough, and he's one of the better sales guys in our industry, or in the sports industry. Not really my industry anymore, but in the sports industry. And he was just telling me about a new big deal they just closed with Anheuser-Busch. So I'm excited to have you on, bud. How you doing?
I'm great. So great to see you. Been way too long.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Do me a favor. Can you give like the 2 minutes quickly on kind of your background, where you came from, and what you're doing?
Sure. So I'm from the East Coast. I grew up I was born in the city, grew up in northern New Jersey, went to Boston College, interned at the NFL league office. Had no idea I wanted to be in sports. Took an internship, fell in love with it. My first job was with the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Was there for 8 years, from 96 to 04. Something we'll come back to is at the time.
Those were like dog years, by the way. Back then, those were like a year in Madison Square Garden was like dog years back then. So that's a really long time to be there.
8 years is long. The cool thing about that experience was we had either we owned or had some rights to almost every team in the market.
Right.
So it was like really learning how to put together integrated marketing packages. At the time, I worked with a guy named Peter Fagan, who is now the president of the Bucks, and a guy named Pat McDonough, who is now the CFO of the Bucks. And we can kind of get to how that came about in a second. Got a call in 2004. The Nets were being sold to Bruce Ratner with Jay-Z as a partner, and they're planned on moving the team to Brooklyn. They offered me the job to run marketing there. And with the Garden, I was in corporate sales. I didn't have a lot of marketing experience, and the idea of going from this gigantic ocean to this little property that had a plan to move the team from New Jersey to Brooklyn was a great opportunity. Did that. We sold the naming rights to the Barclays Center to Barclays.
Yep.
While I was there. Then I went to a couple of more entrepreneurial opportunities. I worked with Peter for the second time at Marquee Jet and MGX Lab. Then I went to work for one of the minority owners of the Celtics in some properties that he had, including an acquisition of AS Roma, big soccer team in Italy. And then 8 years ago, I moved to Milwaukee to work for the Bucks.
Which is insane, man. It really is insane. You've got like a story, like, again, in the sports industry, you've got a storied like past, the people that you've worked with. I mean, the fact that you got, you're talking about Fagan and obviously Marquee Jet and Raptor and the folks over there, like you've worked with so many amazing people. And what I think is really cool, you were just talking, you met Fagan when you were at the Garden 20 years ago, and the fact that you went to work with him 12 or 13 years later, right? It's about keeping relationships. You talk about that like in your process, and I'm sure you keep in touch with all those people at Marquee, and talk about like building relationships, right? I think it's such a key part to this kind of sales, this idea of sales.
It's everything. Like people are everything, whether it's running a company, whether it's selling, it's all about people. Peter and I have a special bond. In fact, we had this incredible growth at the Garden at that time. We had just exponential growth. The Rangers were in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Knicks were in the finals. And this group, like I used to say, everybody comes through Madison Square Garden in the sports industry at least once a year. So you
Yeah.
met so many people, and all those people, it was my formative years in business. I didn't really realize it at the time because it was my first job. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that I was, again, what Peter and I call collecting people that would influence me even, 20 something years later. Super interesting story about how he ended up in Milwaukee. Peter's twin brother teaches, he now runs a school called Trevor Day School in Manhattan. Great school. Mark Lazary and Wes Eden's kids went there. Dan taught all of them. So Peter's twin brother taught them. He's run the same Saturday morning basketball game for almost 30 years, every Saturday, like clockwork. Mark Lazary came to play in it early 2000s. And he said one day, and he was an investor in the Nets when I worked there, when I went to work there in that group that I went to work for. And he always used to say, one day I'm going to buy an NBA team. I'm going to be a majority owner. And in 2014, he bought the Milwaukee Bucks, and we moved to Milwaukee to go run it.
Insanity, man. Insane. I remember I remember before you took the job and you were with Raptor, and there was kind of some uncertainty about kind of what was going on, what were you going to do. And then you took that job, and like a year later, what you guys did for downtown, Milwaukee. I mean, everybody can, now you guys are obviously NBA champions, and you got Giannis, and everything looks all rosy and great. But the process of trying to build that stadium or that arena in downtown and transform the city to be massive Bucks fan, like that was a massive undertaking, right? Like, you just talk about that from, I think there's a marketing play there, and obviously building the arena, but like from a sales perspective, not just from a corporate partner perspective, right, which is certainly part of it, but like getting people to buy in. What was that like? Tell me, like, the way that you and I know you and Peter are really close, right? So it was, I'm sure, a lot of late nights drinking Coors Light at the time, and now probably, Bud Lights now. But like, what was that process like? Like thinking strategically through the sales side of it.
You're right. Not even talk about corporate partnerships. That was a sales job. So when you think about it, the quick story is, because of what happened with the Seattle Supersonics and then moving to OKC, the covenants that were put on the deal were we either had to get a new building or make significant progress towards it in 3 years, or the NBA was going to buy back the team and put them on the open market. So we were really under the gun to get this done. And then we're outsiders, right? We're coming from New York. So the first thing we had to do was sell how big NBA basketball was, because when we got there, it was Packers,
Right.
Brewers, right? The Bucks were like almost a forgotten team. Great fan base, great history, but we had this what we call the lost generation of fans that really weren't into the Bucks. So we had to make people like relight their passion for the Bucks, and the way we got it was getting the young people, right? So it's convincing them of that, but it was also convincing the government entities of what a good financial deal it would be and how good it would be for the city and the state. Because in our minds, if the Bucks were gone, and again, we wouldn't have anything to do with them, it becomes a second-rate city because the Packers don't play in the city, the Brewers don't play in the city.
Right.
It really was the future of the city and what way it was going to go, and it's obviously gone in a positive direction. In fact, today it just got announced that we're going to host the Republican National Convention in 2024.
Amazing.
We also attracted the Democratic National Convention.
I remember that.
Didn't happen because of COVID.
Yep.
So we've had in 4 years attracted two huge conventions, and we've had the NBA Finals. Those things don't happen without Fiserv Forum.
Right. But even just like, and first off, for people that are listening to this and they know Peter. Peter's arguably one of the greatest sales guys in the world, right? Like just everything about him exudes sales, right? And like, and again, I'm sure some people look at him and be like, well, that's a classic sales guy. He is 100%, but when you're around him, it's hard not to love him, right? It's hard not to kind of buy into his story and feel good around him. Like, I remember after we've had conversations about this, like watching the videos of him taking Giannis around the new arena, and I'm like, I just find that to be really intriguing, right? So you're telling the story of this to the city. How do you communicate that from a sales perspective to these corporate partners? Because I'm assuming a large part of this was being funded by partnerships or by your ownership or wherever it may be. You got to start driving revenue, not just taking it from the city.
It was hard at first. I mean, When we first got there, we would go to 3 breakfasts, lunches, and dinners every day, every Kiwanis Club, Elks Club, just telling our story and our vision. And understandably, sometimes people thought we were crazy. Now, because it was a pretty grand vision. fortunately, we had a lot of supporters who bought into it right away, but we had to convince some others. The smartest thing that the ownership group did was, even before this thing started, they got a minority investor group of people that put money into it, who are all Wisconsin based people that could help navigate and really give legitimacy to people in Wisconsin, and could tell our story and help us tell our story for us. So that was super smart. At the time, Peter handed me a piece of paper. He's like, here's our investors. We're going to get to know them. These are the people that run Wisconsin. And that's turned out to be the case.
Right. That's pretty awesome. How'd that shape you personally as a salesperson, right? Like, part of this podcast is about style and growth and learning. Talk about like your maturation from, before you came to Wisconsin to now. Like, tell me some of those kind of key learnings and how you've kind of, put them into practice. Like, as you look back the last 8 years, talk about your growth. I'm curious about that too.
Yeah, it was totally different. A lot of times people ask, what's the difference between doing this in New York and what we're doing now? At the Garden, it's the Garden. It's not easy, but we had a ton of properties, and we're trying to manage and sell those properties as best as possible. It's fairly straightforward. In Brooklyn or in New Jersey, the story was, we're bringing pro sports back to Brooklyn for the first time since the Dodgers left. In Milwaukee, we were trying to save a city, right? And really be part of the community. The first day I walked from the hotel to the office, and I'm looking around, and Peter said, "Oh, you don't realize we're the city planners. Like, we're not just building an arena. We're not just resurrecting a sports team. Like, we're the social activists. We're the city planners. We're everything." And that challenge and trying to tell that story has been one of the best growth opportunities I'll ever have. And you look at it very differently, because, for example, the number one thing that CEOs and CMOs are focused on, even back then when we first got there, is recruiting and retention, right?
Right.
Now you might hear that in New York, but at the time when I was starting my career, you didn't really, because there was always such a pool of people that wanted to work in New York.
Right.
You got to remember that fact, because as you're trying to sell, that's one of your main value propositions, is we're creating something to help attract and recruit and retain talent.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I never really thought about that. But how about you stylistically wise, right? Like, again, coming from New York, coming into Milwaukee, right? You can't come in guns blaring and just be the New York guy that's dropping F-bombs and being all New York and Milwaukee. Like, how is that? How have you had to change, right? Like, stylistically, right? I always tell people, and when I think about styles, right, I think about my style, right? I've always been a very aggressive, hammer you down type of sales guy. I've grown over the years a lot to be a lot more kind of relaxed, I guess, a little bit more. And I think that comes with confidence and experience and relationships. But you could sit around a sales room table, put Peter in there, put Kenny in there, put you in there, put me in there, put Lowell in there, put Russ in there, put whoever else it may be. Everybody's got their own style, right? And that's what makes them so great. Has that changed since you've been there? Have you had to like force yourself to change your style?
No, because I think the things that were important to me here, they hold anywhere. And I would say those main things are, do what you say you're going to do. Like, keep your promises. Now, from a big perspective, when we talk about selling through the vision of what we're going to do in Milwaukee, it didn't turn until the arena was approved and people were like, "Oh, okay, this is going to happen." Like, that was the gas on the flame. And we had a lot of control over that, but when it became real. So that was part of everything we promised we were going to do, whether it be pay a living wage, whether it be use city workers. Like, every single promise we made, we kept. Right. And people still remember that. So that's one thing. I think the overarching thing about my style and why I like partnerships more than any other thing to sell is and I like being at multi-property venues, is I love the challenge of digging in. Like, we never just sell assets. I love the challenge of meeting with a company, learning about them, learning about their competition, learning about their employees, really asking provocative questions to get what their challenges are, and taking all the stuff that we have and matching it up or making stuff up that we don't even have. I think that's the best part of what we do.
That is cool. Let me ask you, you've been around some incredible salespeople, right? Incredible sales organization, incredible leaders, right? And now you're obviously the leader of an incredible sales organization. First question is, do you think you can be taught, or do you think it's born, me being in sales? And then the second part of that is, how do you teach the next generation, right? I think we're living in such a different environment than when you and me grew up in the sales world. Like, how do you teach sales?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think there's a baseline of a personality that needs to exist. I mean, I'll meet people all the time and they'll say, hey, sales just isn't for me. I'm introverted. I don't like asking for money or whatever. And it's like, okay,
Right.
you should be in this industry, but do something else. Like, you need a baseline level of traits, but certainly there's a lot of things that can be taught. And one of the things that we've learned that's really done well for us is the first few years that I was managing the team in Milwaukee, we would go external and look for, I'm going to go find somebody that did a name rights deal and look for, like, quote unquote heavy hitters.
Right.
You know what's worked best for us? Cultivating people in our company. That's been the best thing for us. People that know the company, so they have a shorter learning curve. Maybe they're selling premium or selling tickets. They know our culture. They know our company. And we can kind of finish them off and polish them off. We got one guy 2 years ago. He was in premium sales, selling suites and selling premium tickets, which is very different because that's all local, whereas we're selling globally. Yeah. I told him, hey, you gotta, don't worry about selling the big stuff. At the time we had the patch. Get some local money. Couldn't have been more wrong. He came out guns blazing. He's been our number one seller 2 years in a row.
Amazing.
And we've continued to do that. We've hired all internally. We've trained them at the Bucks and then moved them over to us.
What does that training look like? Like, when you say train them, what does that actually entail? I'm asking this question because I came from a very different place than you in that we didn't get trained, right? Yeah. When I started at SFX, it was 16W, or it was ISI at the time. My first week, couple weeks was like, hey, here's a phone and a phone book. Here's your client list. Go figure it out. And that was pretty much the extent of my training, right? And I had great people that I worked with, and obviously I learned around them, but I wasn't classically trained. Like, you guys have a training program for these young kids?
It's more formal in tickets. Ours
Right.
is less formal, but we know things that work. And what I say is we make sure that they don't veer too far off the tracks and waste a lot of time. So we have a pretty good support system. Like, we had 2 entry-level people start a few weeks ago, and between myself, their managers, and our partner strategy and management team, we kind of meet with them. One of us will meet with them every day to make sure that they're not chasing something that's not worth chasing. They're finding what their style is going to work, what strategy is going to work for them. That's really what our training is.
Yeah. That's a hard one. Like that for me, like what you just said, helping them figure out their style and their way of doing about it. Because, like I said, I think everybody's got a different stylistically. Like, how do you help? I just find it's intriguing to me, like trying to figure out or help other people figure that out, right? Because so many times the kids that are working for you are going to try to be Matt Pazaras, right? They're going to try to sell the way you sell and look at things the way that you look at. And the reality is that's good. But to be great, you've got to take pieces of people and then, I think, internalize it and then find your own styles. Like, how do you help guide people? This young generation, I think there's some amazing talent out there. And I also think that working at home on a sales side is not as good as working in an office. But, like, how do you help harness that?
So the first part is, can't micromanage a sales process, right? So I like to let them make their own discoveries, but without wasting time. So, for example, we have a system where you can draft at any time 50 accounts. So you have 50 accounts that you're working on, because it used to be like unlimited and you can't possibly really work on 400 accounts, right? So 50 accounts, and every time they draft, they drop or they draft, they send it to our whole department, and I'll sit down with them and say, all right, why are you drafting this company? Okay,
when you say draft, are you like doing this in like, when you say draft, I think about you guys in a draft room and there's a whole bunch of, untapped companies up there and people are drafting. Are you doing that, or people just going through lists saying these are 50?
No. So let's say somebody has 50 and they'll say, you know what? I want to take these 3 and I want to drop these 3. And they'll send a draft note.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so I'll ask them, right, why did you draft these companies? And they'll say their thought process. Okay, that could be a challenge because of this, or that's a good one. And as they're in the process, like especially when they're starting, we'll stay really close to them and help them look for signs either that are positive and keep going, or it's negative and it's not going to go. The mistake I think I made early on was I would give salespeople too much rope, even though I thought it was not going to go anywhere, because I was afraid of discouraging them. When in fact, that was counterproductive because I let them waste too much time. I'd rather let them find out on their own that it's not going to happen, but in much less time.
Yeah. But helping them figure out the process a little bit better. Yeah.
One of the things I learned from Brett Yormark when I was at the Nets, great salesperson.
Yeah, well, historically one of the best in the industry, right? He's almost like a folk figure of sales in sports.
And just got named the commissioner of the Big 12.
Yeah.
He really taught me the art of creating profiles for what you want. So especially when you have a big asset that you want to sell, because again, like I said, I don't really, what I like to do is figure out the needs of a company and then match stuff to them. But sometimes you just have to sell a specific thing, like naming rights. Yep. So when we were selling the naming rights of what became the Barclays Center at the time, if you remember, almost every team in this area was building a stadium. MetLife, the Garden was doing the rebuild, right? So everybody was out in the street for naming rights. And Brett said, everybody's going to go to the financial companies. Here's who everybody's going to be calling. We're going to find a financial company that needs to plant a flag in the US. They're not going to be based here. And that ended up being right on. It was Barclays.
So what does he mean by profile? Like as you're putting that into other aspects of, of the Bucks today, what does that mean?
Characteristics that if we think this company is going to have these 6 characteristics, if we can start looking at companies, the more characteristics they have that match that, the better off we're going to be. We just did it when we sold our patch to Motorola.
Awesome. So before we got on the phone, we were just talking about the Anheuser-Busch deal. Tell me about the Anheuser-Busch deal. And I'm curious, not just that you supplanted Coors, which is a massive deal, but tell me about that process. Like, you walk as much as you can. Obviously, I don't know trade secrets or whatever, maybe, but like, tell me a little bit about that process, because it's a really big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal, especially in Milwaukee, which is Brew City.
That's what I mean.
Right? And we've had a long and we had a great partnership with Molson Coors for decades.
Right.
That was the only deal that we had that was from the prior ownership. So that had the rights into a new arena. So we were still on the same deal. Great partners of ours. We work with them really well. For Anheuser-Busch, their local distributor in Wisconsin not only distributes Anheuser-Busch products, but they distribute a ton of locally made Wisconsin beers.
Gotcha.
So we married together the distributor and Anheuser-Busch, and that's how we put it together.
Awesome. And so that's a little bit more complicated, right? Because it's not just rights, media and advertising, but I'm assuming it's also pouring rights inside the arena.
Well, you can't sell pouring rights, but it gives us, we sold marketing rights, but it gives us a frontline view. We're going to lead the marketing with all of Anheuser-Busch's products. Michelob Ultra is the official beer of the NBA. But on the service side and the experience side, now we have a relationship where we're going to be able to create marketing relationships and fan experience relationships with the Anheuser-Busch products, and then integrate some of those other products.
Pretty awesome. Tell me about the patch stuff, because I know there's been some noise, not just in the NBA, but I think was it the Red Sox? Somebody just sold the largest patch deal. Was it the Sox that sold $15 million a year or whatever? You guys were pretty early. The NBA was pretty early in selling these patch deals. What was that process like?
Yeah, Adam Silver is very progressive on these things. So yeah, we were the first league to do that. We're actually on our second patch. Our first one was Harley Davidson.
Right. Another local company, right?
Local company, Milwaukee based.
Yeah.
Great partner for us. Great first patch. As that was coming up for renewal, and we were out in the marketplace. Motorola had actually done a deal with the Indiana Pacers and the Brooklyn Nets. So no company has done more than one patch. They've done 3. Right now, they're just on our jerseys and the Pacers. So we knew there was interest, a level of interest. They're based in Chicago. We got to know them. There was an ownership connection. We got to know them very well. Really, it was a cultural fit. Like, they're really good people. And one of the things that was interesting, we talk about making a match when you're selling something. With the Brooklyn and the Indiana deals, and Indiana's only 4.5 hours away, but I think it was more media based, and this is a media heavy program because you get billions of impressions. I said to them, the difference here is going to be, you're going to be able to activate it, and you're going to be able to feel that activation. Like, your employees are going to be able to participate in this more than any other deal you've done, because only a handful of people were really able to touch it and feel it and go to the market. But we've had their entire company participate, whether it be just coming to games at Fiserv Forum, or last year we held their company-wide sales meeting at Fiserv Forum. So it becomes really personal.
I love that. Tell me about being in sales, right? I think, again, part of this podcast is like trying to demystify the idea of being a salesperson or a sales guy, whatever it may be. And listen, we've all probably been sold windows at our house, or have people walk up and try to sell this, that, and the other, and they personify whatever it may be. Like, when you talk to people, you tell them you're in sales, you proud to be in sales. Like, what's kind of the feeling around that?
I am, and I'm proud because the type of sales that I do and the style I have. Some people, I love the name of the podcast, because some people it matches right with my philosophy, because there are people out there, I'm not saying they're wrong, who think a great salesperson can sell anything to anybody. That's just a classic salesperson.
Yeah.
That's not me. I need to believe in what I'm selling. Now, if I believe in what I'm selling, I think I'm pretty good. But if I don't, then I don't know that it's going to be as effective. And I believe in what we're doing at the Bucks, not only that we have a great business value proposition, but the things that we do from a culture standpoint and in our community.
I'm guessing that even knowing that and being passionate about it, there's probably some companies that you look at and be like, you know what, this just isn't for you. The money doesn't fit. It's not good for your business. I'm listening to what you're saying, and it doesn't kind of align with what we're able to kind of push through.
Absolutely. That certainly happens. And I'd rather say that on the front end than have it blow up later. There's no problem in just saying, hey, this isn't right for us.
Yeah. All right, man. So listen, I kind of told you getting on here, trying to get better at this whole podcast thing. And this is all super valuable to me, right? Like, for me personally too, like, just hearing the process and understanding about, some of the things that you've gone through in the process of selling these bigger deals. Like, in the talent business, we don't go sell, I don't know what the Fiserv Forum deal is. So I'm guessing it's probably 20, 30 million bucks a year. I'm not closing those types of deals. I mean, I don't represent The Rock or whatever it may be. God willing, maybe one point I will, but it's always fun to kind of listen to those, the bigger deals, how they come to fruition. I'm a believer that sometimes the smaller deals are much more painful than the bigger deals, because the smaller deals, typically they mean more to that company, right? If you're asking for a couple $100,000 from a very small company, it has the potential to blow up in their face and change their business versus $20 million from whoever it may be. And it could go wrong, but it's not going to fucking kill their business. I think the smaller ones, they always seem to be harder than the bigger ones. You feel the same way?
Definitely. And something that we've done is we've built what we call our partner strategy and management team. So that team is actually 3 times the size of our sales staff. And they do upsells. So they have to have a sales mentality, because they do upsells, they do renewals, but they're the front lines. And every single partner of ours is important and needs to feel important. Because you're right. Because to them, it might be, we have partners where it's almost 100% of their marketing budget. Right. So you're right. They are looking at it possibly as some sort of risk. And we have to make sure that it's not a risk and that we win for them.
So you have new biz people that are going finding new business, and they're not handling renewals or upsells?
For the most part, no.
And that's just a matter of function of time. There's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah. And by the way, that took a long time to make that switch. because at the beginning we had a typical process where you hung on to everything.
Yeah.
And you can't just walk into a room new from New York and say, all right, we're going to do it this way. You got to have buy-in. And over time, we got to the point where our sellers they understood, hey, I'm spending so much time on this. It's not worth it for me. Like the level that we're at, we need to be chasing bigger deals. So once they bought in, it really took off.
Gotcha. I love it. All right. I got a couple of these quick fire. They're not even quick fire, just answer however the hell you want, right? And I was just trying to think through them. So I'm still kind of getting them through my brain. Cold email or cold call?
Email.
Book or podcast?
Oh, podcast.
What was the last one you first of all, what was the last book you read? And what was the last podcast you listened to?
Well, I read the Knicks book, but I think everybody from our area read that book.
I did not.
Right?
I'm not. I'm from Massachusetts. I'll give you shits about that.
That's true. Before that, I read the Phil Knight book.
Okay, awesome. And what about podcasts? What do you listen to?
I like a lot of. I listen to the Sports Business Journal one. A lot of sports media, but I like crime. I listen to a lot of crime podcasts.
Oh, interesting. Are you into like business books and sales books and like are you into kind of that personal growth type of podcast or books or whatever it may be?
I like the podcast. I'll read a ton of articles.
Right.
And if somebody recommends a great book, I'll read that as well. I read Scott O'Neill's book. I like that.
That was a good book, actually. I read that as well. Zoom or old school phone?
I like Zoom.
You like Zoom more than old school phones?
Yeah. So it's so funny because Peter and I, before COVID, we would like just FaceTime each other all the time. and people would think we're nuts. Like, what are you guys doing? And because of the job with Roma, like when we worked with Europe years ago, it was all Skype. And I just would always think, like, why are we spending so much time? We're sending people to do interviews or spending all this money. Why, like, we can just get on Skype and do it this way. So when COVID happened, I was like, yeah, we should be doing this all along. So I'm all for it.
You were ready. All right, suit or jacket and jeans?
Jacket and jeans.
Jacket and jeans, right? The classic kind of sports, the sports uniform. When you go to any of these events, it's like every schmo's got jacket and jeans, and more so than ever, they're wearing some type of Nike Airs or something along those lines, right? For sure.
And as you can imagine, we have.
You got the beautiful green ones.
Well, you walk into our office, it's like a Nike show. You got,
like
who's got what that day?
I love it. You know, it's funny. I got relatively flat feet. I can't wear them. Like they're so wildly uncomfortable to me, right? Like I feel like my hand is just like slapping on the ground my foot slapping on the ground every time I walk in them.
We're big on customized Air Force Ones and all the Giannis shoes.
Send them. I'm 10 and a half. Send them over.
Same as me.
Biggest sales pet peeve?
People that don't listen. People that don't listen. I mean, it's what when I tell our people, and you have to remind them, sometimes you have to reinforce it. First of all, we don't even have an evergreen deck that we walk into. You might not see anything written from us until the third meeting. And I tell them, why would we walk into a room and tell them, and sometimes you do if it's an international company, you're gonna tell them we won the championship. We have Giannis Antetokounmpo. They know all that.
Right.
We're there to talk about you and learn about you. So you tell us about you and ask good questions so we can come up with solutions. Why would we talk about ourselves?
Yeah. I just to go on that, I think making assumptions about people and companies, and I did this for a long time in emails and first cold reach outs. It's like, I can change your business. So I got a great solution for this. I got a great solution for that. Finally, it was like, well, wait a second. I don't know enough about your business to tell you if I do have a good solution or not. So like to put it in an email is wildly presumptuous, right? And in some ways, it's like you're cold emailing me or cold calling me to tell me that you have a solution for a problem you don't even know I have, right? So it goes back to kind of the listening. Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve actually is when I'm on the other side. So if I had $1 for every time I got a cold reach out and said, I have XYZ technology, it's going to help you sell sponsorships, sell
Right.
merchandise, sell food and beverage, and sell tickets, I'd be a bazillionaire.
Yeah.
What I say to that is, great. How do you know about our business? And typically they don't know about our business.
Yeah. That might not even be a problem.
Right.
Right. Might not be an issue. Right. That's all I got, dude. I'm super appreciative. First of your friendship. I know we don't talk nearly enough. I don't see you nearly enough, but the fact that you email right back and said, let's do this within 20 minutes. And I know you're sitting down at the beach and maybe you got a little more time than normal, but I always love seeing your face and I always love having this conversation. And man, I'm happy as hell for you. And I mean that sincerely, because I know how hard it was and how hard it is, and what you guys accomplished is really quite amazing.
The most overwhelming thing about winning the championship last year is I literally heard from everybody I've ever met.
Yeah.
And it was like genuine, like you said, genuine happiness. And it was so cool just to get the text, the emails, like everything from like all these people that you care about.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Anyway, thank you, dude. Enjoy the beach, enjoy the bathwater weather that the New Jersey shore is right now. And I'll hit you up next time in Milwaukee. Next time you come to New York, you got time. Let's grab some dinner.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, man. I'll talk to you.